Welcome back to NY Flight Jets Talk. On this stream, we are joined by Jets legend, Jets wide receiver, Mr. Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today?
Good. You can leave the Mister out. Just Wesley Walker's is fine. I always say that too. And people, I've never been used to that. Like even when I retired and I'm teaching and I taught K through 12 in elementary school, and everybody's Mr. Walker. Even adults now will come up, Mr. Walker. When I was just at the Super Bowl, doing an appearance this year's Super Bowl, and people, Mr. Walker, how are you? And I'm like, hey, it's Wesley. I'm different. Especially if you're older than me, you don't have to call me Mr. Walker. So we're good. But it's glad to be here. I'm Connor Long. You sound awesome, and I'm glad you hooked up, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Of course, first time on the show. Hopefully not the last. Let's get right into it. So obviously, drafted in the second round with the Jets. You were projected to go into the in the first round, and then you had a bad knee injury in college that kind of set you back into round two, and then obviously the Jets selected you. What were your emotions like on draft night?
Well, it's different now. And I had an opportunity in 2012 and even before that when it was in New York City. And it is insane, crazy. But back when I got drafted, you just got a simple phone call. And I remember I was so disappointed because I had my family calling me, and naturally, if I got drafted, I would be calling everybody. And it was getting late, and I'm just so disappointed I didn't get that call. And what had happened my senior year, I had, took a blow. I shouldn't have played in the game, but my backup wasn't really doing really well against USC. I'll never forget that. And I got hit on a play going after a bad ball, and got injured. And I didn't know it was really as serious as it sounded. And I remember going home because I was in LA and I was spent time with my family till I went back up to University of California to get looked at. And my grandfather thought, oh, it's just a bruise, and it was killing me. It was really bad. And I get up there, and in the papers, they were saying I was going to get surgery, and I had no idea. And they were waiting for me to get up there, and I was just taking my time because I was there with my family, not realizing. And as an athlete, and I'd never really been hurt, and it's not that I thought I was invincible, but you don't think about these
Yeah.
things. And I remember going through my mind, I'm going to have to get surgery. So I rehabbed. I had to get the surgery. I had a lateral ligament that came off the bone. They had to reattach, and I had a very, very loose knee, which I've often injured. And I just got my knee replaced. That knee replaced in February of this year, and I was so disappointed not getting the call. But I'll never forget this because I was a track runner, I didn't have the greatest of seasons, but I did that to try to help me because track was very instrumental of helping me be in shape and helping my speed and everything else. And so I remember New Orleans called me. They're starting the second round. And I was actually excited because I had a buddy of mine who played at Cal, and he had gotten drafted number one. His name was Chuck Muncie, and he's passed away since. And great athlete. And I kind of emulated his life. He was like my role model. And so I was really excited. He was a big partier too. And it probably been bad for us to get together like that, following each other. And so I get the call, and I'm thinking it's New Orleans. And and the reason I was so surprised because Mike Hollenbach was the general manager. He said, you are going to be my number one draft choice until you hurt your knee. So I get the call, and it's a Connie Nicholas, and she's the first pro scout, woman scout, and she was secretary during that time, who called me, and we're friendly to this day. She's a great friend of mine, and she worked there for a long time, and I just have a wonderful relationship. And her father was our team orthopedist, and he ran the show when it came to orthopedic surgeries and whatnot. Her father was our family doctor, and Jim Nicholas was her uncle who ran the orthopedic situation. So I remember they sent out a trainer, Bob Reese, to look at me during physicals and seeing who they want to draft. And I guess I got the go ahead, and they ended up drafting me. And I want to talk further about that with my coach, Dan Henney, who was there at the time. And I just talked to him recently because I'm getting ready to write a autobiography book. And he was telling me that his number one draft choice was Stanley Morgan, who went to the Patriots, and he came off the board. And so this Mike Hollenbeck had showed him film, and they ended up drafting me. But when I got to the Jets, nobody knew I was blind in one of my eyes.
Yes.
So I've never read an eye chart. So, and this is a true story. And this was actually confirmed just recently, because part of this book I want Dan Henning to be a part of with me, because he brought me to another level as a player. So he says when Stanley Morgan came off the board, Mike Hollenbeck had showed him film of me. They ended up getting me. So I come in for physicals. And the Jets had drafted this guy, Marvin Powell. And he's like a 5-time All-Pro tackle. And he's passed away. Just him and Jim Sweeney, a center that we had. And it breaks my heart because Marvin Powell and myself got drafted during the same time. And he was my best man when I got married. He even lived with me for a while. We were really good friends, and he was going through some things after he retired. I mean, he was very smart, became a lawyer, but something happened with him. He lost touch with a lot of people. I don't know what happened, but they found him in bed thinking he had a heart attack in his sleep, and it was ironic. Jim Sweeney, our center, who was only 60, had a major heart attack, and they both passed away during the same week. So I was excited to be a part of that situation with the Jets because it's a big major market. I either wanted to really be in California with warmer weather. I don't care any place warm. But New York, I was always worried about being cold, but that's just a major market. And I knew nothing about the Jets or, Joe Namath, just Eddie Bell, like I was talking to you before, a receiver that I'd heard of because he was wearing white shoes during a Monday night game, and Richard Casser. So I go there for the physical. And I couldn't read the eye chart. And then when you go into the doctor's office, you always see this big E. That's the first letter. And I said, I'd be lying to you. I see the big E, but I'm blind in one of my, I can't see the eye chart. So the owner, Leon Hess, was livid. I just drafted a tackle with loose knees, and you're telling me we just drafted a receiver with a bad knee and legally blind, And they didn't want me, Dan said. But Dan, he watched film, and he brought me in, and he looked at me throwing the ball with Richard Todd, and I remember going through mini camp, and they decided to sign me right away, and that the rest is history. But Dan said that he saw me running and catching the ball, and he also taught me some things to make me even better because I could always run by people with no effort at all. But I was able to learn the game to make me better. And when you look at the Jets and any team, if you can't take your players and know what they bring to the table and put them in positions and teach them some things to make them better, and that's what coaching is all about, and you don't get that on a pro level. I can honestly say I had my high school coach and Dan Henning as a pro, and I had many coaches. We had learned techniques and all that stuff. But somebody that makes you better, that teaches you something that makes you better and makes you understand and make you aware of what you can do. And I'll tell you, I was able to do some things that people could not even dream about as a receiver. And that's because I had a great coach in Dan Henning. And I was happy to get drafted. Like, I wish they had the things they have now because I've been at the draft. These guys pull up in SUVs. They have a red carpet treatment. Yeah. You get a whole row of people doing interviews. I remember I was with, they picked different athletes to be like, say, if you were, like I was the second round choice, they put me with a guy that the Jets had. They were in the draft in the second round. And I remember in 2012, they drafted Stephen Hill. Nobody knows where Stephen Hill is now. Hey, and I had a chance to be introduced the draft choice. So they will put you with players and you pull up in these SUVs and the red carpet and you got all these interviews and it's a big party atmosphere. It's really, really nice. We didn't have that. We got a simple phone call and some guys would get the phone call and they'd be someplace else. The teams couldn't even get a hold of them at the time, so it's much, much different. But I'm so happy I had the opportunity to play with the New York Jets. I miss New York because I reside in Arizona now. But I'm from California, and I thought I'd never leave California. When I lived in LA, and then I went to Berkeley in Northern California. I love the Golden Gate. It's one of my favorite places in the world to visit. I thought I would never leave there. I go to the Jets. I ended up buying a house there. Was there for many, many, many years until 2 years ago, just moving from Arizona. I never thought I'd leave New York. And, but it is just a great place to be. And you said it before when we were talking, it's the media capital. There's so much exposure you can get. I'm just glad I had the opportunity, but things weren't perfect and I didn't achieve the goals that I really wanted to achieve. And I know it was possible, but some things are beyond your control. But I can honestly say that I was happy to be a New York Jet.
I agree. Being a New York Jet though, and Giant too, can be very difficult because you like you mentioned, you have all the press, the media capital. All eyes are on you. Meanwhile, if you wanted less pressure, you could go out and play in like a maybe like a Detroit type of market. I mean, they still love their football there, but
Absolutely.
the press isn't like right on top of you. Every move you make, watching you. You mentioned being blind in one eye. Obviously, was very difficult. As you, if you go like this, you have to turn all the way out to
Yeah.
see the ball. How did you kind of? Well, obviously you couldn't overcome it because it was there. But how did you kind of face that challenge of being blind in one eye?
I have to say it's my faith, and I have to give it to God, Jesus. I don't know what He did, but He created that and made it possible for me. I've always been a great athlete, and I love sports from the time I started playing in elementary school. And my goals were to be the best athlete, but I wanted to be the best student also with that, and I was able to do that, and that's consequently I earned a scholarship. But I think because I was born that way, I was able to adjust because I remember when my father he noticed my eye used to drift off. And I love baseball. I was playing catch with him,
Mhm.
and he noticed something was wrong, and my eye used to be just cockeyed or drift off. And I used to be very, and I still am. I wear glasses. I used to have fake glasses or wear sunglasses because I could talk to you, or if I gave a speech or I'm in class and I'm calling on you, people would look around. Who is he looking at? I used to have people make fun of me because of my eye, and especially being a little scrawny receiver, always being too small and being criticized as I'm growing up. But that motivated me to want to do better and to work hard. So as a receiver, there are things you have to do with two eyes, getting your head around, focusing, concentrating, putting yourself in position to be able to catch the ball. And I think the fact that I was born that way, I was able to adjust. And I remember going to the doctor where they had to put a patch over my good
Wow.
eye to try to strengthen my eye, and I couldn't see. I would be cheating, trying to see, and it was horrible for me. And then there was a point where the doctor said, "Well, when you were 14, we could possibly do surgery when the eye is fully developed." But there wasn't going to be a guarantee, and there was a chance that I would have to wear these thick bifocal glasses, or they weren't sure what would be done or what could happen, or I would be able to see. And there wasn't a guarantee. So we did nothing with it, which I'm glad, because heaven forbid if I had had some type of surgery and it went awry and something didn't work properly, I'd have been more disappointed. But that's one of the reasons I kept it hid. And I don't know why in elementary, junior high school, nobody ever really checked my eyes until I got drafted with the Jets. And I kept it hid because I wanted to play sports and I didn't want it to hinder me. And I remember I got hit with the baseball in my eye, and my mom was always terrified. And now I understand with your kids, when you see them get injured, oh man, it gives you a pit in your stomach. My kids play football and lacrosse, and whenever they got hurt, I mean, I want to run out on the field. So I can't imagine what my mom went through
Yeah.
being scared. And now that I'm older, and I was even thinking about this yesterday when I was driving, I came out of the house and the sun's really bright and glaring. And sometimes I get this where I can't hardly see it, or it's like a fog or a glaze. And it happens once in a while. And I got to talk to the doctor about that, because I know he said I could maybe have a start of a cataract in my good eye, but that's down the road to get something corrected. But I'm now starting to think, because I watched my grandmother who lost her eyesight to cataracts, when right before she passed away, and I've been thinking a lot lately. Wonder if something did happen to my good eye, I'd be totally, totally blind. So you take things for granted, and in life, period, don't take anything for granted. And I'm very thankful that I had the career that I had, the fact that I had a handicap, and it's a good way for me as a role model for other kids who have had handicaps that there's a way for you to accomplish certain things despite no matter what. And it takes a lot of work ethic, a lot of discipline, but also a belief in yourself. You know, self confidence is just so unique for people, and some people don't have that. And so I've tried to encourage people, despite anything that comes your way, because I was always been told I was too small. Being a black athlete, I had a coach call me, said to a lot of us, "You're a pea brain, and you'll never amount to anything." So that kind of thing inspired me to be better. And I don't care what anybody says to me. I'm going to try to prove you wrong. And so I was able to do that. But I think the fact that I was born with it, and the weirdest thing, I'm aware of objects on the side. I have peripheral vision on the side. So I think that helps, you know, but I can't see out of the eye. In different lighting, I can't see anything. And I developed one year this iritis in my right and my good eye, and I was seeing these colors and fog, and I'm asking the players, "Do you see this big rainbow around lamps?" I woke up in the morning, we're getting ready to play a football game. I look out of my window, I see this fog, and nobody could see it. I'm like, "There's something wrong here." And I go to the trainer and say, "Well, Wesley, we'll check it out. We'll see." And I think I was against Cincinnati or something. I think I had 80 yards or something like that. And I'm playing with this condition, but I find out that they thought it was glaucoma. They thought it may be a torn retina. And that's when I really started thinking, man, I wonder if something happened to my good eye. But it turned out to be iritis. And I had this doctor on Long Island who diagnosed it right away. And I used to have to take these drops at Pred Forte, which can cause cataracts also. But I haven't had a bout since I've retired. It happened a couple of different times. I mean, I came up one time with Bell's palsy when I was playing. Right side of my face was paralyzed. I drooled on myself. I didn't want to tell anybody. I'm like, what's going on? And I would come up with these things sometimes. I have enough problems being blind, you know. But you can overcome these things, the point I'm trying to get at. But I think because I was a youngster and I was born with it, so I made the adjustments. But first and foremost, that's God upstairs, Jesus talking to me to make me who I am. And hopefully he made me where I can, you know, help others who have similar situations. And I've been able to do that with kids who've had problems. And we can talk about that later on. But I have uh, a kid by the name of Andy Solari. His dad was a teacher, and his dad heard about me through John Madden, who coached, and he was listening to the radio about football players that had handicaps, and he heard about me and my eye situation, and he wrote me this letter. His son was losing his eyesight through a problem that he had, and he was going to probably have to get surgery. And his name was Andy Solari. He was 9.5. And so when I got the letter, I called him right away. He was shocked. I called him at school, and then he said, "Can I have my son call, or I'll call your son later on when he's home?" So we end up hooking up. So over the years, I as it grows, because he's an adult male now with kids, and I just would try to write him letters, encourage him. I send him jerseys. I have 15, 20 different trading cards. I made a frame up and sent it to him, stuff like that to encourage him. I got letters from his teachers, from him, and I want to write about this in my book. And his family flew me out to California for his graduation. He went to Cal, where I went to school, not only got 1 degree, 2 degrees. And they threw this brunch, and he said these words that I will never forget. His family and just what influence I had on him, but he doesn't know the influence he had on me. And that's why I love the fans and people like yourselves, because you inspire me for what you're trying to do. And I hope you accomplish it. I don't know what your goals are, but it can be done. And if I can help you get there, I'm going to try to do that. And so I would do that for anybody. But I was floored when his family flew me out to California, put me up in a nice hotel, gave me their daughter's brand new VW to drive around, and we became close. They'd come out, like I'd play a game, they would come out. I remember going to San Francisco. They live in San Francisco. And they would come I would be hosting these fans. They would come and visit. They came out to my house. We had barbecues, and we went to the beach. I remember going over Robert Moses Bridge. There was an accident. We had to get out of the car, and me and Andy were throwing the football out till we could move traffic and everything. the beach. But it's a wonderful story, and he's an adult now. He came out to visit me. He's got 2 kids now, and they're just beautiful. And met his wife, and just a wonderful, wonderful story. So those are the kind of things that I want to talk about in this book. But at the same time, with you, what I'm trying to say to you, with me and your viewers, you can overcome a lot of obstacles. And if you can help others with your situation, like you mentioned, Marty Lyons and his charity, that's what we do. And that's what you're supposed to do. There's too many negative things that go on that athletes are involved with, and but they don't talk enough about the positive things. But I've been able to accomplish things because of not only work ethic, but my beliefs and whatnot. But I'm just glad that I've been able to do what I did being blind in one eye. And I'd like to, just what you said, cover one eye. And some of you receivers out there, let's see you do that with one eye. I don't know if I get enough credit with that. And Bobby Jackson used to say that all the time. I'd like to see any receiver could play with one eye to do the things that you do.
I agree. Very, very inspiring. I really like what you mentioned there. We got Boy Green in here. Something that makes me feel very old. Connor was like negative 22 when Wesley Walker played his final season in the NFL.
Yeah.
Thank you for the statistic, Boy Green. Loved your morning show today. Thank you. I appreciate it. Wow. That's very interesting.
That's why you got to do your research. You can still follow. And there are people that work for the Jets, and they wouldn't know what I brought to the table, or as well as other great players in the past. But you have to do your research. Doesn't mean that you can't be a fan, you can't follow a team just because you weren't born at that time. But it's important to get the history, get the research, so and you know what people brought to the table, and then you can even express what you feel about the current season, the current players. But the past is help create what these players have now, and that's so important. And I think a lot of the young players now, they don't give enough credit to the guys who made this game and made it a little bit easier. I mean, I used to be half dressed, running to a deli to get sandwiches to eat for lunch before our meetings. These guys are in hotels during training camp. They get time off in training camp. They don't hit. We were hitting. It's just so different. But these guys, and the guys even before me, paved the way to make it better for me. And so I hope that they know that's the same thing they have to do for others and appreciate what they have, because without the past, it wouldn't be the present.
I agree. Boy Green, thank you for coming in. Also, Alan, I miss Toon and Walker, the good old days. Don't we all? That duo was legendary. Wesley?
I love it. I can think of Don Maynard and George Sauer, Wayne Cabret. There's these duos that came about, with their counterparts, and I know Toon and Walker is part of that group who, were able to have 1,000-yard seasons with each other, and I love Al Toon. I love all my teammates, and I don't know if they really realize that or not, but I love my teammates. And Al went through a difficult time. His daughter 2 years ago, maybe, it seems like only a year ago, because my mom had passed away during a time I was going through a difficult time. My family didn't want to tell me, but his daughter had gotten killed by her ex-husband, and had a 3-year-old daughter, which his other daughter adopted. And it's just heartbreaking. And these are the things that people don't realize, that, there are hardships that people go through, but you have to persevere and get through those things. And the only reason I'm telling you this, because I was going through a very difficult time with my mom, and thank God I went down. My wife and my daughter-in-law told me, you better get down there, because my brother, he told me my mom was kind of in hospice, but he didn't let me know that she was dying. So we spent the last 2 weeks with her, and she couldn't function. And we were there when she took her last breath, and I was just happy to be there. And it was a difficult time for me, but I think of my friend Al Toon, my teammate, who was going through probably a more difficult time. And I remember talking to his wife, because I was with JoJo Townsell, one of my teammates, for last year's Super Bowl, because they had it in Arizona. And Al had asked us to come to dinner. He has a place out in Scottsdale, so we both went. And I remember his wife telling me they still didn't have any closure. They don't even know why that happened. But I've had things happen to my teammates with their kids. I think of a Barry Bennett. He adopted some kid. He had like 5 or 6 kids, and one of them, he, murdered his mom and dad, and he's my teammate. I think of Jim Sweeney, who just passed away. I'm looking at a picture of Jim Sweeney and Marvin Powell. And I have a picture with Joe Glecko, Jim Sweeney, and we're smiling at one of our Legends Weekend. And he had a major heart attack. My friend Marvin Powell, that I said I was really close to, and I can't believe that he's not with us. But you go through life, and that's part of the process. And I'm going through that aging process where I appreciate life and things that I have been blessed with. And I want to keep that going as long as I can. But there are things that go on that we are affected by. And when you mentioned Al, great athlete, there was probably a subtle competition between us both. And I used to rib him, hey, give me as many balls as you get. I'll get twice the yards and touchdowns or whatever. But I just love my teammates. I love Al Toon, and I'm still praying for his family because that's just something hard to get over. But we all have hurdles to cross, and the only way I know how to get over them is through my faith. And that's first and foremost for me. And I thank you for even asking that question. But I think about Al as we speak and his family. I love Jane and Al and his sons. I just saw them in last year's Super Bowl, and it was great to be around his family and him. And it's great to see. But he's always busy, and I wish I could see him more often.
I agree. Well, you mentioned, that team was a very legendary team. You had Toon and Walker, and then you also had the sack exchange, overlapped for a little. But those days were very, very good days for the Jets fan base, so to speak, as we've had that team are the top players we've had all time, not counting Joe Namath and Don Maynard, who obviously played that cycle, I feel like, before you guys. That whole decade, 2 decades, so to speak, were some of the best in Jets history. Speaking of that time you had with the Jets, what were your emotions like during your 4-touchdown game against the Dolphins in '86?
Well, you just mentioned these guys, and that's what it's all about for me. And that particular game in 1986, I actually have to give tribute to my teammates. And you mentioned guys like Joe Glecko, the sack has changed, Mark Gastineau, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame also. These guys could play with anybody. And I think of Al Toon, myself, and others on that team. We could play with anybody. And there's a lot of guys on my team that wouldn't get the accolades. They made me better. They were tough, and they were just as tough as anybody that I played against and deserved to have that type of recognition. But we were a force to be reckoned with. And I remember that game vividly because in 1986, we're playing Miami, and it was an overtime game. We won 51-45, and it went into overtime with the last play that I was able to hook up with Kenny O'Brien in overtime. But there was a lot of plays that were created by my teammates, and that's the only reason it made that possible. I loved my teammates. I knew the kind of people that we had in that locker room, and we could play with anyone. And I really believe that. And I just wish they had gotten the recognition. But I was very angry at Joe Walton during that time. I had strained my groin in the week during that week of practice, and I wasn't sure I was even going to play. And we go into the game, and I'm not even being used. And I remember telling my backup, Kurt Sohn, who was my MVP of that game, because I came in, had that stellar game, but I'd missed the week of practice, and then I played the game. And here is a guy who's doing all this practicing in practice, who deserves to be in that game, and he played somewhat. And I just congratulated. And I told the press when I'm getting interviewed, I was like the most valuable player. And I'm like, this guy right here, right next to me, who took my place in practice, but yet I'm getting the accolades. And I'm sure he would have loved to have been in that position. And he was very capable of doing that. And I remember being angry at Joe Walton. I told Kurt, you might as well be playing because he's not really using. I might as well rest my groin. So I remember going in, I think it was the second quarter, and we called this play, which I'd been waiting on, and I'm wide open. Kenny O'Brien hits me for this big bomb. That was the first score. And it was towards the right before the half. I come back to Joe Walton. Let's go deep. This play that we call, and usually, and I was always known as a deep player or the deep threat, and I didn't like that. I felt I could play in the slot, be wide, short, just give me the opportunity. But so I always wanted to go deep because I could run by people. So Joe Walton was hesitating. He calls it, but the Miami Dolphins, they were in the right defense, and that shouldn't have been completed. But O'Brien stuck it in a hole. I slip a tackle and go in for my second touchdown, and we go in at the half. And it was going back and forth, and that was one of the greatest games in NFL history, the duel between Kenny O'Brien and Dan Marino. And O'Brien, won that battle over Dan Marino. And that's why I love Kenny O'Brien. And so we go back and forth. I even missed the ball. They thought I had possession of it, and I fumbled, and they go back and they score. But it was going back and forth. But I thought I had lost the game. We get the ball back. We don't have much time. And if you go back and look at the sequence of plays, there was some sequence of plays with Johnny Hector, who did this hook and lateral with Mickey Schuler, and to keep a drive alive. Mickey Schuler made this one play to break a tackle, fake a hook and lateral, and to get out of bounds with 5 seconds left. And it was an awesome play. That's why it wasn't just Wesley Walker. I'm on the sidelines. They're calling this play that we had worked on all the time and inside the 20. And I've always wanted, I couldn't wait to have this play called. I'm on the sideline. So Kurt Stone really was going to be in on that play. Kenny O'Brien comes to the side. Wesley, get in. And I went in, And so it was 5 seconds left. And in the highlights, you could see the time click down to no time left. O'Brien sticks it in over the middle in between like 4 or 5 guys. I catch it with my hands, and heaven forbid, because I wasn't known for catching the ball over the middle. That was always a thing. Marty Lyons called me Sideline Sammy all the time, always going out of bounds and whatnot. But I made this catch with my hand over the middle. I couldn't believe it myself. I mean, I'm like in a dream where I still can't believe it. And I could watch that over and over again. So we tie the game with no time left, and we go into overtime. We receive the kickoff. And Michael Harper gets a kickoff, and he really fumbled, and it should have been the Miami ball, but they gave us the ball back. We were running and passing. We just were clicking on all offensive phases. And Altoon had a great game. We're moving the ball, we're running. And then on the last play, they call a bomb to me. Kenny O'Brien sticks it in. We get the touchdown. We win the game 51-45. It's something I will never forget. I've had a lot of great games, believe me, that you wouldn't even know about unless you really follow the Jets or follow Wesley Walker. And that's just one of many, but certainly with the yardage and the 4 touchdowns, that just doesn't happen very often. I tell people this all the time. Do I miss playing? I said, no, I don't miss playing because I don't miss losing. I don't miss being hurt. But when you're winning, if I was scoring touchdown and going to the Super Bowl, I'd probably miss it even more. But I will never forget that game, but I will not forget Kenny O'Brien is the best. And if it wasn't for my teammates, got people surrounded, and that's defensive too, even though it wouldn't have been a defensive game, that situation with me would never happen. I couldn't do that without my teammates.
I agree. It's a team sport. A lot of people mention individual accolades. At the end of the day, it all goes to waste if the team doesn't perform. Like we all mentioned, for example, this year, Breece Hall, great year. Garrett Wilson, great year. Obviously, we struggled with quarterback play, but yeah, those accolades are great because there are the offensive player, defensive player of the year. But all that matters at the end of the day is winning the football game. That is all that matters because if you can't win, your team's not good. And the goal is to win a Super Bowl every year. And for this Jets team to miss the playoffs 13 years in a row, they've had good individual players, but we need to collaborate and break that playoff drought this year. And with this regime, I don't think breaking the playoff drought is enough for them to stay employed. I think we need to win one and have a lengthy run in the playoffs this year. So that's what I find interesting with individual accolades. You can have very solid players and still not have a team that competes for a Super Bowl Super Bowl or a conference championship. At the end of the day, it really comes down to how the team performs. We have a question from Snowball. So many fond memories at Shea Stadium. Wesley literally played on dirt. How does he feel about the turf issues at MetLife?
I've never had any problems with turf. Obviously, there is a problem, and I'm sure most players will say that the more injuries occur. I remember my first introduction in college to turf. We played Alabama, and I thought we were going to go in from Cal and whoop this team, and we got beat 66-0. But I remember the first time I played on turf, I still have the mark on my hand and my elbow from the big turf burn. So I didn't like that, but it never bothered me to play on turf. And now in New York during the season when it gets cold, it's better than being on grass. But I don't know if there's a correlation. There's always the talk about you get more injuries on turf or grass. I know I probably had more injuries with my knee on grass, but I know there's a lot of non-contact injuries with turf. So that's going to be a big problem. I've heard the Jets may be moving to grass or whatever too, and a lot of teams are doing that. But I know this game that you play, you're going to get injuries, whether it's on turf or grass. We were fortunate enough to play on grass at Shea Stadium, but I'll tell you what, it was very difficult in Shea Stadium because when we first started playing, especially at the beginning of the season, half it was a baseball field and half of it was grass. So you would literally be playing on dirt, and that's not fun either. But the bottom line is, whether you play on turf or grass, you can get injured. I think more non-contact injuries, or when you get caught up and planted in the turf, you're more apt to get more hurt and have a serious injury. And I remember Bruce Harper, one of my teammates, just jarred his knee in the end zone after a run, didn't get tackled, but it ended his career. So I really feel that can happen. I remember going to Hofstra and being on the turf when we'd have our scrimmages and we'd go across the street. And back then the turf was, you could see cement, the rips, and it's all different now. And you go to a certain stadium, Cincinnati, you can see the screws, and it looks good on TV, but people don't know what you're even playing on, when you look at it. But it's so different now. I know in the Cardinal Stadium here in Arizona, they have a grass, but they can shovel it in and out on this machine, and it's kind of cool. But every place is different. But when it comes to the turf or grass, I just really believe there's more non-contact injuries. And also when you get caught up, when your foot or your knees, you get planted in such a way and you get hit, you're more apt to get hurt. So I would say you're more apt to get hurt on turf than grass. But I've had more injuries with my knee on grass than I did the turf. That's the funny thing.
That's interesting what you mentioned there. Obviously, you mentioned MetLife maybe going back to grass. So they have the World Cup there in 2026. They're going to have to go to grass for that because the World Cup requires a grass field. So we're going to have to turn to grass for that no matter what. And also you mentioned playing at Shea Stadium at the time. That was crazy at the time. You had 4 teams playing there. The Jets, the Giants, Mets, and Yankees. 4 teams, 2 baseball. You were. It's kind of like with the Raiders when the Raiders were in Oakland and they played at the Coliseum.
Yep.
Except make believe they had another football team playing there and another baseball team playing there. Like at the time, it's crazy to have 4 teams playing in one stadium, 2 completely different sports. I mean, let's say you took a bad hit. Did you really feel banged up on that MetLife grass? I mean, on that Shea Stadium grass?
No, it's no different than anything else. This is a violent, a physical game. And I look at it this way. We used to be in training camp for 2-3 weeks. I mean, really smacking each other. I mean, really scrimmaging. Nowadays, you go to training camp, I'm falling asleep. It's like boring because they have regulated practices. They are in shorts and shoulder pads most of the time. They have designated days they can give players off. We did not have that. We were tough physical players, and your body just takes its toll. And I don't even know, even in high school, when you think of, we used to call our training camp Hell Week. You're going twice a day, and you're doing things that your body physically cannot do, on a long-term basis. And when you think about now where they're trying to regulate practices, and to me, it's like a country club, but you still have this high rate of injury. So there is no one formula that's going to keep you from injury. That's just part of the game. You just have to know yourself what you have to do to try to prepare yourself, and that's being in good physical condition to be ready. Because I don't care what you do, your body is going to take a physical toll. And now they're playing 17 games, and that's even more so. I don't have the formula of what's going to keep you other than to work really hard to get into a training program. They just have so much more things you can do today that we didn't have. Most of the time, we were on our own trying to figure out a way. Some guys would hire people. I remember I hired a guy that helped me out my last 2 years to help training because we didn't have these type of programs or off-season programs like they do have now. But I really believe there's nothing that you can do against injuries. They're going to occur no matter what. And I liken that to this year. I was all excited. Aaron Rodgers brought the team together, so to speak, watching the Hard Knock show, because I've always thought he was sort of on the arrogant side, and I saw a different side, the way he was interacting with the players, bringing people together. And then 4 games in, he gets hurt. And that was really, I mean, he was running for his life, but is it due to the turf? You just don't know. It just happened. I did a simple hook pattern that I've done over here. We call it a stop. You just go down 5-year hook and you catch the ball. I dove for the ball, and boom, I separated my surgeon. And that was on turf. I've done that a million times, whether it's grass or turf. It's just the position that you get caught up. You hit the wrong spot, and that happens. But you just don't know, and it's just so hard and difficult. And I really hate when you have these athletes, and I don't care if you're a free agent or stellar athlete, to see their season go under because of injuries, and that could ruin your career. So that's why this is a business. That's why you have to try to save the money, do what you can, get as much as you can while you can, and get something out of it when you leave the game, because you're going to get hurt inevitably.
Interesting. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers going down 4 plays into the season, and also the Hard Knocks. Starting with the Hard Knocks, your teammate Joe Klecko was also a little concerned how Aaron Rodgers would kind of connect with the younger guys on this team. And once he saw Rodgers come in, he wasn't really too concerned with that. Obviously, 4 snaps into the season, Rodgers goes down. My whole thought process when he went down is this offensive line is not serviceable. We knew he was going to go down at some point. We did not expect it to be 4 plays into the season, and I think most Jet fans can admit that. We expected him to get hurt some point this season, but just not 4 plays into the season.
Absolutely. And there's certain things you certainly can address, and you can be that Monday morning quarterback, say what ifs, and we should have done that. But as an organization, you have to know what's at hand. And every time I do a podcast or interview, I always start off, look, everything looks good on paper. They have the athletes, but the bottom line is if guys can stay healthy, it can be detrimental. And that's what even happened this year. So if you had a problem with the offensive line, and that's an area you got to address, that should be addressed. I'm not so sure even if they had the offensive line. That's why coaching plays a big part. Is it the offensive coordinator? There's a lot of things that go into it. So you have to be on the same page, from the ownership to the people in that building helping run the show. But it definitely comes down to the players, the general managers, and getting the right type of players in the right system. And coaching is so important, down to the offensively, the coordinator, position coaches. When I played, and I'm sure it's like this to a certain degree, there are coaches that would be coaching players that never even played the position. They just had the title. Richie Kotite was our coordinator, or had the title, but he never called a play. Joe Walton did. How he became a head coach, I don't know. But a lot of people don't know these things. But unless you have the players and the coaching, the team, and general manager just setting the stage to put everybody on the program. And coaching is so important. You definitely need the players, but the players need coaching, and you have to put those players in position of what they do best. Not because I have this offense and it's my thing, and the players have to adjust. You have to adjust to those players what they can and cannot do. Unfortunately, health is a vital part of the program. So if you get injuries to key people, it's just going to hurt your team. We went 10-1. I thought we were going to the Super Bowl, and we lose Joe Klecko, Lance Mel, Mark Gastineau, and we were just blasting all cylinders, offensively and defensively. But when our defense got hurt, we weren't getting the field position and not getting set up. I had 12 TDs to go, and we had 5 games left. I'm thinking I'm going to get the record. The record was only 14. by Don Maynard. I got 12 5 games ago. The record at that time was 18. I said, I'm getting this. We stopped throwing the ball. We weren't getting the field position. Consequently, we just went down the tubes. We were lucky to get in the playoff, but we lost. But injury plays a big factor in everything. And I don't care how good you are. If you get guys hurt in key positions, that's why it's so tough to coach in the NFL and with free agency and players here and there and negotiating. It's a difficult thing to do. And I wouldn't want to coach. I don't know how you get through that, but it takes a great mind to be able to put all these things together.
I agree. There are like key pieces, like you mentioned, but you have to learn to win without them. You have to have a balanced team. Like there, listeners know there's been like with the Bryce Huff re-signing, everyone's saying we should re-sign him. I'd rather take the $22.5 million we're gonna pay him per year and go out and get 3 new starters on this offensive line that can really play and get that wide receiver too who can complement Garrett Wilson, like a Mike Evans, even like a Cortland Sutton type of guy who could just come in and be that complement to Garrett Wilson. I think that is what this team really needs.
Well, you can get that, and I understand what you're saying, and that's all true. But you can get those guys, and they could get injured too. And everyone just said, like we thought we were going to have Aaron Rodgers, providing he was going to, have the season that we were thinking of. But those guys can get hurt. I think of Dalvin Cook. I thought he was a viable situation, but he didn't flourish here. And guys can go flourish somewhere else. I thought this was an opportunity for Zach Wilson when Aaron went down to get the experience and to do something. But I'm not sure about the coordinator, and I'm not trying to knock Nathaniel Hackett. His father was my coach in college. He was like a father to me in college, like a Dan Henning. But I saw him change as a person and coaching, and there's people that didn't like him. I don't know why or the reason, and I don't know. I had Nathaniel Hackett as a baby. I used to babysit Paul Hackett's kids, and he was one of them. I have a picture that, as for good luck, I put on my mantle, hoping the Jets would do something, and they just went the other direction. But at the same time, it takes coaching to get these people in certain situations. So there's a lot that goes into it, and you had just said it. They have Garrett Wilson, they have Breece Hall. Despite the people that you have there, as far as I'm concerned, the Jets were capable of using those athletes to win, but they weren't put in the right situations, whether it's play calling, just certain situations that I see from a coaching standpoint. That's what a coach is supposed to be able to do, despite injuries, because you're going to have them. That's where you have to find a way to win and use your players, no matter who you have. And that's what you have to be able to bring out in the guys that you have. The Jets couldn't do that. And that separates the good teams from the bad team. What do you do regardless? And Kansas City is a typical example. Who won the Super Bowl. And I had some question marks, but at the end of the day, when it came down to it, I thought Baltimore was going to be the team. But they played and performed like they were capable of playing when it counted. And you have to do it regardless of injuries or any situation. You find a way to overcome.
I agree. Snowball has another question. What's the biggest factor that makes a successful position coach?
I think relating to your players. Some coaches don't think you can be friends, and I disagree with that to a certain extent. You don't want to. You can be friendly, but you also have to get the best out of your players. You have to know your players, and you have to look at what they can do, and then within your offensive schemes, let's say, or as a coordinator, I have to take those things or those attributes to see how I could fit him into my offensive scheme. What does this person do best? A coach, a real good coach, will relate to his players, and he will teach them, and he will make them better, and he will find a way to do things to educate them to make them successful. But it takes a special person to do that. I had that in Dan Henning, but then as a head coach, he went to Atlanta, and there were some key players, all-pro players, that didn't like him. I don't know what happens to coaches when they become head coaches. And I know Joe Walton was the coordinator, was very, very good, inspired me, but then he became a demotivator when he became head coach because he tried to do too many things. He got away from what he did best with coaching, and you have to do too many things. There's some people that are not even qualified or they're coaching. They just don't have it. And whether the Jets have those type of people is a big question mark, in my opinion, right now. And I just hope they get it done, and they need some players. But you cannot tell me Brees Hall can't play. You can't tell me that Garrett Wilson can't play. They have some studs on that football team. Now, the quarterback situation obviously is a problem. I think Zach Wilson, in another situation, if he gets the right coaching, he will probably be successful. That's what happens to a lot of guys. But that's a big question mark. But that's up to Zach to get it done. And he's got to get it done despite his situation. And that wasn't happening. Whether it's coaching or players, it's a combination of both, I think. But somehow, no matter what your situation is, and, I didn't have the greatest of teams, but I'm going to do the best that Wesley Walker can do and do my job and do it to the best of my ability and make things happen. A lot of guys can't even do that when they get the opportunity. They have the guys that are certainly capable, but it's just not that easy. But it takes a team, like I said, to be successful when you have to be on the same page.
I agree. Another question from Damien. What a player Wesley was. I would be interested to know who was the toughest player he played against.
I get that a lot. And when you get to this level, they're all tough. And I will say this. My guys in practice prepared me, and they were tough as anyone that I've ever played against. Bobby Jackson, he was like my Darrelle Revis. Hitting wise, Jerry Holmes was a hitter on our team. He was only 175, but he would light you up. I have a neck condition. I don't know if he discovered or I had it from prior hits. He hit me in practice. I went paralyzed. And
oh wow.
And I'll never forget in '86. And I had to go get tested. I had to go to all these specialists. They flew me out to Buffalo to specialists. And Dennis Byrd had broken his neck, so there was a concern. So I went on to play 3 more years with this condition, and they said if it happened again, I would have to retire. And I remember I wasn't even going to say anything, and I hit somebody in 1989 on a crackback block, and everybody's high-fiving, and they don't even know. I can't even feel my body, and I'm walking in slow motion off the field. And I wasn't going to say anything, and then I had to tell them, and they put me on IR. And since then, I have a plate in the cage. I have 14 screws in my neck I have a neck fusion. But I had my back was just as bad also, and I couldn't even bend over my last year to touch my toes. The Jets didn't know that. I just kind of faked it. But you're playing that because you love the game so much. But there's a lot of things that go into it. And the toughest player, though, Mel Blount of Pittsburgh Steelers, he was he could run, but he also had help. They had a defense where we used to call it a cover 6, and it is 2 deep safeties where you're getting help, and then you can press, and he could do that. And so he's getting help. So it's not like he's one-on-one. And I would love to go one-on-one. I remember going one-on-one with Lester Hayes, who led the league, probably should be in the Hall of Fame. But on one-on-one, you couldn't cover me. I had a combination of Frank Minifield and Hanford Dixon in Cleveland. Tough guys, just like Bobby Jackson. They weren't tall in stature, but physical, and they'll beat you at the line of scrimmage. Those are the guys that you have to worry about. Darryl Green was another guy. Tough, but could run. He's the only one that I've ever had where I could beat him on something, and then he could recover. And because I could run fast, I was very deceptive. People didn't know how fast I was, but I'm like, this guy can run. It scared me. And when I have to think about a player coming off the line of scrimmage, that's when I know that you are a special player. Bobby Jackson was that player for me with the Jets. But toughness, Kenny Easley, safety from Seattle, man, he would knock your block off. Jack Tatum, I'm dating myself. He was fierce. I remember going up for a ball. I had a great game against them. We won the game. I think I had over 100-something yards, couple of touchdowns. But I remember going up for this one ball. I see him coming. I'm thinking I'm getting jacked up. And he ends up hitting his own man, Willie Brown, and knocked him out of the game. But he was a tough physical player. He even knocked out a receiver, Darryl Stringley, and paralyzed him, But when you reach that level, Ronnie Lott, there's so many players. Victor Green for the Jets. I could go on a list when you talk about the greatest of all time. There's a lot of players that played the game that just didn't get the accolades, but they're tough physical football players. But the point I'm getting at, my guys in practice that I practiced against were tough, physical football players. I would put Bobby Jackson against any receiver or any DB that I went against, and he made me better. And that's why Wesley Walker had the success, because my guys in practice made me better, and we could play with anybody. But the public or the fans on other teams or Jet fans would never know that.
I agree. One more question before we get to a call, and then we'll let Wesley go. Snowball, with the improvements to instant replay, how many more catches does Wesley think he would have that were called out of bounds?
That really didn't make a difference. I'm glad they have instant replay. I think I really never had any plays that were in bounds that I can remember, maybe one. But I remember having this 80-yard touchdown call back, because of a penalty or whatever. But I didn't really have many like that. And I've always wanted the replays, but sometimes that's not perfect. The referees are not perfect. There was times I know me and my team would think this game is rigged, so to speak. But it's very, very difficult to win in this league. And playing this game is very interesting. And if you take this year's Super Bowl, that Super Bowl could have went either way with the fumbles or turnover, either team, depending on who got the ball back and was able to make the plays. Kansas City just happened to get the ball back and make the plays. But there were certain times where they turned the ball over. San Francisco took advantage of it, and vice versa. They always say the game is, just the game of inches. You do not know. And there's usually about maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 plays that are going to change the course of a game. That's why you have to be into it for 60 minutes. You don't know which play, which turnover, what special teams. Everybody is an integral part of a situation in winning. And one lousy play, a missed PAT, the little things could cost you a game. That's why everybody has to be on the same page, and you have to do your job.
I agree. Getting to the call, we have Jason Giambi joining the show. Jason, how are you doing today?
Hey, buddy, how you doing? Wesley, pleasure talking to you. I've gotten to know Connor through the Twitter Spaces. He's the best, so very cool to talk to you. And
Well, this is my first time. I love him already.
yeah, no, it's been awesome, and it's great talking to you. I was actually at the hockey game yesterday. Obviously, former Jet season ticket holder, but I see your name up there, so very cool. Just wanted to get your thoughts on the offseason this year. Obviously, this year is do or die. Really, no other choice. We talk about the draft every day, going on the Twitter Spaces and whatnot. Obviously, offensive line being a big pressing need, but you being a wide receiver yourself, great wide receiver talent. I think like 2 or 3 guys are projected to go into the top 10. You got a guy like Brock Bowers, who I feel like we haven't had an excellent tight end in forever. Just your thoughts on, just the upcoming draft class and what you think the Jets should do. Thank you so much.
When it goes to the draft, and it's very hard, and you really have to do your research and homework, and you can look at all the draft analysts who's coming out. I don't follow it that closely. All I know is when the Jets draft, and there are mistakes that can be made, you just have to get that best available athlete depending on your needs. Obviously, the Jets have to address that offensive line. Garrett Wilson is an awesome player, and it's nice to have somebody on that other side if you can get it. You just mentioned the tight end. They haven't even used a tight end, and I don't even know how long. And hopefully they can fill those positions. But again, you don't know who's going to be available, but you draft on need as you go, and that's where the research comes in. And I'm hoping the Jets can do that, and they could put players in there, whether it's offense or defense, but you just want to get the best players available, and you don't know who's going to be that choice. And they have a lot of things to think about, not only the offensive line, but even the quarterback situation. I think Aaron Rodgers is a big question mark. Can he stay healthy? Can they protect him? You got guys like Connor was saying, and Breece Hall. Do you trade him? Do you get more money to try to get other players? and I'd hate to see him leave. But they have an opportunity to do something really, really good. And I thought it was going to be this year, especially with the quality that they have on defense. But I know this, every year it comes down to health and injuries, and you got to keep people healthy. But it also, they have to have the coaching to get within that system to put players in the best situation that they can. And I always believe that coaches kind of want you to fit into their situation. And I believe you have to find a way, no matter what your schemes are, what is best to get the best out of these players. And I hope the Jets can do that. But they're going to have to address every need from the quarterback to the offensive line. And then you have to wonder what you're going to do in that running back situation, or to get players in at the particular positions of need. I don't know who's going to be available, but hopefully if the right guy is on your board, he's available when you draft.
Speaking of, and you brought up the injury of Aaron Rodgers, Wesley. Like, did you ever have an Achilles injury? Is it something to bounce back from? Like, because when you look at the quarterbacks around the league, right? Like Tom Brady did it till he was 45, but other than Tom Brady, I don't think any quarterback has played at a high level past the age of 40. I mean, we're talking about a top 5 all-time great quarterback here, but like you said, I'm kind of nervous about this. I don't think it's a sure thing that he's going to come back and play at an MVP level.
I don't think so, but it was interesting that he got some special treatments to try to get back. If they would have been successful, he probably would have tried to come back. I know I've had my Achilles operated on just after I retired, and just my recovery and just doing the things I do now, and I still have problems with mine now, and I'm not even playing, and it's just really weird. Because I used to have this tendonitis. I used to have to wear these. A lot of people didn't even know it. And I had problems with my Achilles in both of mine. And I would wear these special boots, even with a felt pad and orthotics, to help try to protect it. And I really tore mine during the off season and being retired. But I link it to the stuff, the trauma that you put on it. And as you get older, things can happen. It could be a little twist, a little thing like that, but to come off of it, and I've watched basketball players, some people have come off it. Look at what's the player name, I can't think of, from the Suns now, who had Achilles, and Kobe Bryant had come off it and worked really hard. But as you get older, it can happen, and anything can happen. But you can develop, and the quarterback is a little bit different because you're not moving around as much as like a running back or a skill position. You're just dropping back. But I still find it hard with his age that he's going to be able to come back.
Thank you so much, Wesley. Appreciate it. Thank you, Connor, for having me.
Thank you.
Of course. Great call. I love what he said about Rodgers. Interesting what he said about, I agree with him. I don't see him playing at an MVP level. We just need him to be average, though. If we could get 3 new starters on this offensive line, and this offensive line can be average, we just need Aaron Rodgers to be average. This defense will do the work. I mean, this defense, top to bottom, whether it's the defensive line, the secondary, or the DBs, I mean, defense stacked. We just need the offense to be average.
Well, I'm sure if you talk to Aaron Rodgers, he doesn't want to be average. And
he doesn't want to. But
I don't think any athlete is going to tell you, no matter how old you get. I mean, I probably was 36 when I retired, and I'm like, there are people thinking I had lost a step, but you couldn't convince me that I couldn't play, because that's the athlete said, just the athlete that you are. You believe in yourself. You know what you can do. You're going to do that, but it depends on how great a shape he's in, how he's responded to the treatments, how well that Achilles is. And I'm not going to say that he doesn't have a chance to do that. I just know it's more difficult when you get hurt. I mean, when you get injured and being older, it's hard enough when you're younger, and it's not easy. But I know you have to be in tip-top shape to play this game. I just have a lot of reservations when you are been healthy and then the injuries start to occur. And so when you get injuries over the time, I think your body is just not physically ready for that, and especially when you don't have the type of atmosphere that is created during the time when you're playing physically. You can't get that in the off season. And once you get into with your body, it's just so much more difficult. And certainly when you get older, it's just a lot more difficult. But I'm not going to say that he can't overcome that, and he can possibly have an MVP season. I'm not going to discount that. Anything can happen. Only God knows that one.
I agree. Wesley, thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts?
Hey, I'm glad kind of long to be able to meet you, to share my little thoughts, and to be able to meet you. And I hope, I don't know what direction you plan on going in, but I'm going to support you anyway. So I wish you good luck. And don't forget about me when you become the superstar.
Thank you, guys. That was show number 1 on the day. Show number 2 will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, joined by Michael Nania of Jets X Factor. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, JETS, 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 Jets.
Peace.